Stephen, I guess leadership is always sometimes spoken about. I guess when it often doesn't work out, there's a lot of feedback on why, when it does work out, people sometimes overlook it. I think we all know that there's such a reliance on management and leadership. From a personal perspective, because I don't want to just say that it's 5 years. I think, as you just highlighted, it was 5 years where you went into something that you didn't anticipate. It was 5 years that included COVID, and we all know how that's impacted us. But for you personally, from a leadership perspective, what are some of the key lessons you learned? And perhaps as you learned those lessons, what are the messages you can send out to people just in terms of leadership and why it's so important through this journey?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think there's a big difference between leadership and management. Leadership, sometimes you've got to get out front and lead. Management, you're just directing the traffic. And that's fine in a incoming tide, but it's not very good in an outgoing tide. Some of the key things for me was always communicate, but communicate clearly and honestly. Don't sugarcoat and don't pretend you know stuff when you don't know stuff. If you don't, you don't. In that way, you actually get a much better conversation and a much better feedback. If you're always telling people what they want to hear, then they're not going to get involved because they've heard what they want to hear. So that was the first thing, and a lot of communication. I mean, it's interesting that a small company like ours got Newsmaker of the Year in 2020 for all the effort we did in our communications. And that's quite an amazing accolade if you think about everything that was going on. The second thing, which is always a cliche, but only if you've been in a crisis will you understand it fully, and that is really do hire good people. Take time to hire people, because it takes longer and more stress to get rid of them than actually getting, people on board. And actually it takes a lot of pressure off you. I mean, one of my things has always been my sort of big, hairy, audacious goal is to see if one day as a CEO I can get no emails, because then I've delegated properly. And then I've got time to think and time to strategize. So, good people. The third thing that is really, really important is, as a leader, sometimes you just have to make decisions, and they might be unpopular and you might get them wrong. But if you don't make a decision, no one knows where they're going. If you make a bad decision, at least people are going in some direction together as a collective. You can always change a bad decision. You can't change no decision. As Michael Jordan says, he's missed every basket he never threw. And I found that the most challenging thing, especially through COVID, making decisions like 20% pay cuts and having to live that. It's tough, it affects people. But if you look back, they were exactly the right decisions. And fortunately, with a good board and good team, I was able to discuss those decisions, get a view. But at the end of the day, I had to own it. Might have been horribly wrong, but I had to own it. And that's what you have to do. You've got to believe it, do your work, get the data, make a decision, and run with it.
Stephen, it's always been about business, and that's generally the focus, especially when things aren't going great. It's difficult, and I don't think many people would understand how the last 5 years may be for yourself and obviously your leadership team. But while I have you here, I'd love to understand, there must have been moments that were not just tough, but where Stephen said, shucks, I'm throwing in the towel, or this is not worth it. Whether those happened or not, and I assume they did, how did you get through those moments?
That's a big question. Listen, there were many moments where you didn't know you'd make it through the month. You didn't know whether your customers were going to paint the whole of the EOH with the same brush, as opposed to the people who were actually in the EOH making a problem. It was very difficult. You get through it by not personalizing it. I always say, you work to live, you don't live to work. And so if you don't personalize it, it's just a process. It's like climbing, I think I wrote the thing in the newspaper, it's like climbing Mount Everest. When you start at the bottom, you think you never get to the top. But every day you take a step, you move forward, just don't stop moving. And you need good people around you, and you need people that you can discuss things. So that's why, going back to one of your earlier questions, being able to get access to people who are not close to the thing explain it to them and get their reaction helps a hell of a lot, because otherwise you get very much in the detail. But for me, it wasn't about that we were definitely not going to fail. It was about, if we fail, you've got to fail having put your best effort in. And that was really all I could do. And yes, you've got to change a lot of things, and you've got to keep on your toes, and you've got to make a lot of decisions, but you've got to have a support system. Otherwise, you can't do it. People who internalize it and try and solve it themselves out of embarrassment or whatever, I don't know, you'll never do it.
Stephen, thank you. That's been your journey. I think from myself, a really big thank you to yourself and the team. I think you guys have done a great job at EOH. As I said, it's not over. I think there's much more that still can be done. But it's been a privilege to be partnering with you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for taking the time to share with us on your journey. We don't often have these type of feedback discussions on how tough situations actually work out. It's probably easier now than when we went through the last 5 years and some of the tough discussions we had. But I'm glad to see where it is, and well done to you and the team, and all the best on your journey. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks very much, Zaid. And also personal thanks for you, because you also put a lot of effort in to make sure that we got the access and we got our message across and everything. And those little things actually count a lot, and hopefully Standard Bank will reap the benefits.